Good evening. Thank you for tuning in to the Lessons of Vietnam show. Here we strive to tell the real stories of the Vietnam War and the men and women who served in it. It's important to us to dispel the myths, mistruths, and misunderstandings of the war and its participants. It's one of the most misunderstood wars in the history of wars, I believe. I am Bill Dixon, Vietnam veteran, 1967-68, Tet survivor, and your host for the show. We broadcast from the Raleigh, North Carolina studios of Nissan Communications. You should check out some of his other shows online. You are welcome and encouraged to participate with your host and our guest. With your comments or questions, just call in or use Skype to be on live, an important part of the show. Please tell if anything when you hear on the head you think is wrong. You can see there on the screen the addresses and so forth. Computers 2K Voice if you want to come in on Skype, which is better, or the number 919-518-9773. Tonight we have a special guest I'm excited about. I've been enjoying his book. We just talked about it. The book is Still Rain, The Tet Offensive of 1968. And our special guest tonight is Author John Harrison. John, good to have you tonight. And I was going to tell everybody about all your accomplishments and so forth, but I'm not certain we have enough time on the show. But if you go to the next screen, I'd appreciate it. Okay. Wait, we had a little technical problem here. We're going to work it. All right. What we're going to do is I'm going to talk about John's accomplishments while we're getting that stage back. John is a teacher. He is world hit. The only thing I can see wrong with what John has done is he graduated from the UNC. If he had graduated from North Carolina State, it wouldn't be so bad, but he graduated from UNC in history. But I guess if you got to go, history was the way. And but we always want to make sure that because of our veterans out there and those of us, I go to group meetings and talk to a lot of other veterans and so forth. But if you know a veteran that you think is in crisis, please have them to call this number. There's some good folks there that are willing to talk to them. We're still averaging between 20 and 22 veterans a day. And the worst part about it is a good part of them are Vietnam vets because the Vietnam vets are now starting to retire and having more times on their hand and bad thoughts and so forth are coming back to them. Okay. So there's a picture of John with his the book cover, one of the covers, and the crest of the 506th Airborne Infantry Regiment. He was airborne. I was a leg, so maybe we can get along because these airborne guys always look down on us legs because they're jumping out of their planes. And the Currahees, right?
That's right.
Okay. And but that's John and the book, and I can guarantee you will thoroughly enjoy the book. You all ought to go and order it tonight before the show's over with. Now, this is John's resume. I didn't post it all because, like I said, we couldn't go through the whole thing. But his teaching, he has been spoken at Georgetown University, George Mason University, Bishop O'Connor High School. He's been an attorney, a special assistant state's attorney for Anne Arundel County, Maryland. He's had his own company. Then he's been partner in several others. He's been in real estate, chairman of the board, chief executive officer. He was expert at real estate evaluation, which is a challenge to itself because it changes constantly. Project manager, mortgage banking. Industrial design, you designed a couple things that, let's see, the Harrison Traveler. This is a piece of fine leather or canvas and leather luggage designed by me for people who read to carry books, both paper and electronic. That's always good because you can't figure out where you're going to put all that stuff when you go on the airplane. Board of directors, civic things, education, language. He didn't put down English, but I know he speaks English. But he also speaks Spanish. Military service, that's the important thing for tonight. He was a captain in infantry. John, you know what the most dangerous thing in Vietnam was? A second lieutenant, a map and a compass.
second lieutenant with a map and a compass.
Yes,
Yeah, that would be
it
about the most
wasn't
dangerous.
engineers. Okay.
Both good and bad, I might add.
Yeah. Entered the Army as a private, commissioned as an infantry lieutenant upon completion of officer candidate school at 20 years old, assigned to Company A, 3rd Battalion Airborne, 506th Infantry Regiment in 1st Brigade, 101st Airborne Division, initially executive officer, later assumed additional duty of rifle platoon leader. And it's important to point out he was doing both jobs at the same time at one time. While in Vietnam, I served as a rifle platoon leader, executive officer, and company commander, including combat operations incidental to the Tet 68 offensive. Decorations and awards: Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device for valor, 2 oak leaf clusters, Army Commendation Medal, Purple Heart, Vietnamese Service Medal, Vietnamese Campaign Medal, National Defense Medal, Valorous Unit Citations, Vietnamese Gallantry Cross, Vietnamese Civic Action Medal, Vietnamese Wound Medal, 1 Overseas Service Bar, 4 Campaign Stars, Combat Infantry, and Parachute Badge. You don't have down here is your Good Conduct Medal.
You know, I missed that by literally one day.
Well, I didn't get one either. What caused it to be one day?
I was an enlisted man for 11 months and 29 days.
Oh, okay.
And if I'd been enlisted for 12 months or 11 months and 30 days, I'd have had that Good Conduct Medal. Undeserved, I might add, but I'd have had it.
Well, maybe that's the reason I didn't get mine. This is a map of the Battle of Phan That. And if you look at the little map on the top, it shows you, beside it, it shows you in relation to Saigon and Bien Hoa. There, it's South China Sea. And you can see there was a lot going on back then. Okay. Now, this is one of John's pictures at, this is your platoon that you, when you were still in the States?
This was my platoon in late September of 67, right before we left.
Okay. I'm going to let you talk about the pictures. We'll go through them as you like. So,
okay. When you look at this, the X's on top, all the guys with X's on top did get shot, but I don't know why the X's are there. This was not my picture. This was sent to me by one of the guys. Just about everybody you see here at one time or another was wounded. Just
all right.
about.
All right. Let's go to the next picture then. All right.
Yeah, this will give you an idea. And there's 2 guys in the middle, Ford and I can't remember the other guy's name right now, but they were both wounded too, so they should have WIA on it. And of course, what you have to realize is as people came in to replace them, some of them were wounded and killed too. I got 19 replacements in one day one time.
Jeez. All right. For those of you out there who don't understand, the KIA is killed in action. The WIA is wounded in action. And you can see there that pretty much nobody got through totally unscathed the whole time.
The guys that do not have that on there, except for either 2 or 3 of them, all DEROs, that is to say, came home in less than 12 months, usually about 3 to 4 months. Some of them made it through TET, some did not, but they all, and maybe 5 months for some of them, but most of them were there for the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, John, let me explain what we're talking about here for our audience out there. Some of our audience out there, Tet is the #1 holiday for North and South Vietnam, even though it's celebrated a little bit on different days. It's when the families all get together. It's like our Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, everything you can think of. And every year there was a ceasefire where the North Vietnamese celebrated Tet and the South Vietnamese celebrated Tet. And there was a lot of military posts that were severely undermanned during Tet because of the Vietnamese people who were going home for the Tet holidays and so forth. Now, the communist idea was to mount this huge thing going on Tet, and that the Vietnamese people were going to rise up and fight with them to overcome the South Vietnamese military, government, and Americans. And the rise up of the civilians or the population of South Vietnam did not happen. And basically, this was kind of the turning point of the war. As far as the Viet Cong, which was the guerrillas we fought, we basically wiped them out as a fighting unit during that period of time. And all the news media talks about it being a total surprise, and I don't think it was. I think you covered that some in your book. It was not a total surprise. A lot of people did know it was coming in. In fact, some of the troops that were sent up around Khe Sanh were brought back around Saigon and so forth. So they were spread out, knowing that something was going to happen. And the North Vietnamese actually celebrated Tet a day earlier, was their excuse. But then I just want to make sure that people understood what we're talking about with Tet, because we got all kinds of people.
It was a colossal victory. People don't understand, that are not historians, but it was the equivalent of Cana. Essentially, we wiped them out. Not just the military units, but for example, around Phan Thiet, where we were, they brought in the political people to act as guides for these people, for their sappers and others to attack LZ Betty, which was our base area. And we went out one day and I called it the turkey shoot. We just wiped them out. And they never, ever recovered from that. Now, one of the things that Giap did, Giap was the commanding general of the North Vietnamese army, and he was actually opposed to Tet. He thought it was a bad idea. But the guy that planned it, a general named Tron, had a heart attack and died. And therefore, Giap had to come in and take over and try and salvage the situation. Well, when he did that, one of his first acts was to substitute the use of the VC units, VC main force units, as instead of the NVA or North Vietnamese Army units, so that when they attacked the cities, the people would look out there and see, well, these are Southerners, because they speak Vietnamese, but like our North and South, they do have different accents, and they can tell where you're coming from or where you were raised by the way you speak. So I've spoken to several civic groups, and one of the questions I ask, who's heard of Tet? Well, usually about half the people have heard of Tet. And of that half, usually almost all of them think we lost. And we didn't. We had a tremendous victory. And when you essentially are attacked, and the attackers do not overrun a single unit, the numbers between Tet and the Battle of the Bulge are just about identical, except for one thing. 20,000 Americans did not surrender in Vietnam. Nobody did. Instead of 20,000 missing after the battle, as there were after the Battle of the Bulge, there were 148 missing all year. It is numerically probably one of the greatest victories in the history of warfare, but nobody knows that. And they should know that. It's not fair that they don't know that.
Yes, I have a lot of problems with Ken Burns's recent stupid documentary there. And it's just like all the news about how they took over the news media, and you can go online and see it today, how the communists took over the American embassy there in Saigon. And I was there shortly after, and they never got out of the courtyard.
They were dead. They were dead in the courtyard.
Yes.
There were 19 of them. One of them made it into Colonel Jacobs' house, which was inside the compound. Yeah. Colonel Jacobs, by the by, was a CIA officer, retired Army CIA, but they call him an embassy official. But he was just one of the CIA people there. But he shot that dude coming through his bedroom door. That was the only guy that I know of that made it inside any of the buildings. They did not make it into the embassy.
Well, didn't one of the embassy guards throw him a pistol up out of the window?
They did. They threw him a 45 up, and that was what he used to shoot the guy trying to come through the door. Yeah. That particular point, by the by, with the 101st Airborne Division landed on the roof and with the final people that took that back, we were not. If you look at where we were, the 101st was at Khe Sanh. The 101st was at Hue. And you always hear about the Marines there, but the 101st was there. 1st Air Cav was there. The 101st was also in Saigon. They were also at Phan Thiet. And just about any history you read of the Vietnam War, there'll be a line in it somewhere that will say that the battles were quickly beaten back across the country, except Khe Sanh, Hue, Saigon, and Phan Thiet. And that's the last time you'll hear about Phan Thiet. Yeah. But I was at Phan Thiet. And the book tells some of the stories about it. One thing I did want to say about our guys, we trained in the States as a unit before we went over, which is what you ought to do and what I understand they do now. But because of that, we were really close. One of our guys, who is now a police chief, named Mark Cologne, when they do a medical triage, they divide wounded coming into 3 classes. The class that will live if nothing is done. The class of men that will live if they receive immediate medical help. And the class of men that really nothing can be done for. They're going to die no matter what we do for them. So what triage, a French word, they started at World War I. What they were doing during Tet, the guys in the first group, that is to say the lightly wounded, they would load them on medical aircraft immediately, fly them to the States, to Japan, to Hawaii, wherever there was an open bed in the hospital. And Mark was shipped all the way back to the States. And when he got back, he went to the hospital, he got fixed up, and then he went AWOL, and he bought an airplane ticket with his own money and flew back to Vietnam. And I had a heck of a time getting that cleared up because the Army was upset with him for going AWOL to rejoin his unit. That's the kind of people we were with there.
Yes, that group cohesion is so important. The only thing about it is, though, when you do lose somebody, it's somebody that you've known for a while, but as far as a unit action, that you can't ask for more.
You really can't. It does make it more difficult to write what we call as the letter, which is the letter you send to the survivors when somebody's killed as XO. Of course, I did that a lot. I would write the letters, company commander would sign them. But if you know the person that's going to receive it, that's ugly. That's just no good way to say that. That's not a good thing to do.
Yeah.
I hated doing that.
Yeah, but there are several things you point out in your book that the rotation of officers, and once they got learning what they were supposed to be doing, they rotated back because somebody needed their tickets punched.
That was absurd, and they did do that, and they did it on purpose. And I don't know what lunatic came up with that idea, but I would cheerfully cause him some pain because probably him. But what they would do, we came over as a unit. We're there for 5 months, and they basically eviscerated us. They took the battalion commander, they took the S3, who does the operational planning officer, and all the company commanders, and then all the platoon leaders that were still alive, and moved them out. And brought in new guys, and the average unit in Vietnam would have 3 or 4, we had 3 company commanders in A company in 12 months. None of them got wounded. There was no reason for that. I mean, the second one he was just barely beginning to get an idea of what he was doing when they relieved him. And they didn't relieve him for cause because he was doing badly. They relieved him because another officer needed to get time as a, quote, combat commander so he could be promoted.
Yeah.
Because if you got up on a review board later in your career and there's 2 guys going to be promoted and one guy's got combat time and one guy doesn't, well, there's no question who's going to be promoted. Now, exactly what they did to resolve that part of the problem, I don't know. But now when they send a unit over, they keep them together. Now, you're still going to get, if a company commander gets killed or platoon leader gets killed or badly wounded or something like that, you're going to get these green cherry officers coming in and taking over under very adverse circumstances. That is very different from doing it on purpose.
Well, as you mentioned in your book, sergeants and lieutenants had a tendency to get wounded or killed. So they're always being replaced. But
yeah, we had all of our platoon. I don't know why it happened. All of our platoon sergeants got killed. Part of that was the way we ran things. There'd be a point squad, and almost all the time, I would have a point man, a slack man, and I'm third man in line. And most platoon leaders were pretty close to that. The Army says you should have a squad in front of you, but you're too far back in the way things developed in Vietnam. And that put you up on point really all the time. And the point squad would rotate every day, or I rotated them more or less after every time we got in action. But I didn't rotate me. I didn't rotate my RTO. And we stayed on point. So, yeah, they did tend to get shot quite regularly. Now, the other side of that meant that because you're up there on point, the guy leading the maneuver element is usually your platoon sergeant from the back of the platoon. And that's why they got shot up a lot as well. We were very lucky. We went over with E7 platoon sergeants and E6 squad leaders. And rank doesn't necessarily mean you know what you're doing, but experience counts. And we had experience throughout the battalion. It was. I've often said that the best job I ever had, bar none, second lieutenant, infantry, platoon leader. It is a mystical experience to lead men in combat. Sometimes a good one, sometimes not so good.
Well, John, our next picture is Sergeant Bunn.
Yeah, that's Jim Bunn. He was 32 or 33 when he was killed. He was my platoon sergeant. He and I were unbelievably close. I knew his wife, I knew his family. His wife's name's Rachel. I still talk to her regularly. His children, I met all of them at one point or another. That's Supply Sergeant Norris on his, holding on to him on Jim's left. Jim didn't have to go back. He was just back from Vietnam, maybe 6-7 months, but he was an experienced platoon sergeant, and he did not want a bunch of guys going over there didn't know what they were doing, and he thought he could help, and he did help. He was really a wonderful human being. He was killed on the February 2nd, the worst day for the 2nd platoon. Of all our battles, that was where we lost the most people. We did not really lose, comparatively speaking, to what some other platoons suffered. We didn't lose that many that day because we were better positioned, I guess is one way to put it. But Jim was trying to get in a house so he could get one of our men off the front porch, and they shot him and killed him. We went back and got his body that night.
Yeah, you tell that story in the book. Yeah.
I do.
You went. In fact, you went back with volunteers that night and got them.
Yes, we did. They call that. It surprised me to an extent, but for example, we're talking about essentially a suicide patrol. Nobody really expected to come back. We hoped to, but we'd had 300 airborne troopers trying to break their way into this position all day. And I'd called in airstrikes all day. I probably called in aircraft, fully loaded F-4s or F-100s that were unloaded by the time they left. I probably called in 24, 26 aircraft that day. It was unbelievable amount of ordnance was dropped.
Yeah, I was surprised in your book how you talked so much about so much of the ordnance coming in close. I can't imagine napalm being close. A mile away is too close, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, the amount of fire that we endured that day, it was cutting trees down. It cut buildings in half like a chainsaw. sliced them right in half, and then it fell down on themselves. It was unbelievable, just unbelievable, man. If you'll come to another picture, I think is in there, the porch. I don't know if I sent you that one or not.
I don't know. Let's see. That's one
No.
the ridge line.
Yeah, this is the Central Highlands. This is what I call Indian country.
Yes.
And it's not jungle, it's climax forest. It's too high for jungle. Not enough water gets up there, but it is absolutely spectacularly beautiful.
And gets chilly from time to time.
It gets cold at night. I saw my breath a couple of times up there. And yeah, we carried these sweaters and we would wear them at night when we were up high. They were very good.
Yeah, this was also the home of the Montagnards, which was very similar to the American Indian until we got there.
Yeah, they were. But the funny thing about them is both the North and the South Vietnamese don't like them very much. The Viets. Yeah. Vietnam actually is home to a variety of people. Most people don't know this, but South Vietnam in particular, there are Chams and Khmer. And then there are the Montagnards, and there are, I believe, 13 tribes of Montagnards, of which the largest is the Rade.
And they are here. They are here in North Carolina. Some of the Special Forces guys have gone up around Asheboro, which is land very similar to the Central Highlands, and bought several thousand acres. And we have a Montagnard village there.
Is that right?
Yes.
Oh,
and
cool.
we have quite a few of the Rades here in Raleigh area also. So Greensboro, North Carolina has quite a few. But
we worked with them. They were in what are called Mike forces or mercenary forces. One of the mercenary forces we worked with was led by the Australian SAS, the Special Air Service, which is the Australian equivalent of our Green Berets. The other one was led by our Green Berets. And those guys, they were tough. I mean, but the SAS were unbelievable. But the guys they were leading were awesome. They were very good. Some of those guys had literally been at war. They might be 40 years old, and they've been at war for 25 years at that time.
The last group of Montagnards came here, had escaped, and were still fighting in the 70s and 80s. They were in Cambodia and given a choice. Lay down your weapons or we're going to kill you. And then a few days later, they're landing at Rotterdam Airport and were brought in here for about 10 weeks. And, none of them have ever got welfare. They all got jobs, maybe 2 or 3 families living in a house. But those folks have know how to work and so forth. Right now, they've been treated worse in the communist Vietnam than they were before.
Yeah, as I said, they don't like them, in particular the Viets. And the Viets originally started around Hanoi, and they spread down the coast and conquered the indigenous people that were there. The only time people went up into the mountains was very, very rarely. The French did it. They're doing hunting expeditions and so forth. But the Viets just wanted the rice-growing regions on the coast. North Vietnam is deficient as far as being able to raise its own food. And that was a big part of why they wanted South Vietnam included. Now, the funny thing about that is the Mekong Delta, which is one of the richest, if not the richest, rice-growing regions in the world, it's in South Vietnam. But until the French took over Indochina, that belonged to Cambodia, not to Vietnam. And it belongs to Vietnam now.
Yeah.
The imperialists in this war were the North.
Yeah. Next picture we got, it looks like you standing almost like a cave there. Let's say 2 helmets on the rock and M16 up against the rocks there. What's going on there?
This is up in the Highlands, to give you an idea of the areas we work. And that actually is Tom Gaffney walking towards the picture, and behind him, I think that's Ray Mayfield, although I can't tell. Tom was the company commander.
Yeah. And
so this would be the central, the perimeter, and he is probably walking back over to a meeting with his platoon leaders. You see the guy with the radio to his ear back there. he was probably talking on the horn to the battalion commander or somebody. Now he's coming back to the meeting.
Mhm.
That's a cup of coffee in his hand, a canteen cup.
Yeah. Okay. Next picture.
He's a great company commander. His
Sounds
special
like
forces, very good company. That's me leaning against an anthill. But not necessarily the best idea in the world. But you can see I got my rifle right next to me. I've got my RTO right next to me. That's Stahl, who's the RTO, and you'll see him in a little while. He's the one with the shot-up helmet.
Yeah, some of those anthills were 6 feet tall. I mean, they were the big, and those ants, when they got a hold of you, you knew.
Oh yeah, I liked them though because they ate RPGs. Most things an RPG would just blast through, but for some reason the anthill would just eat the explosive power and absorb it rather than let it blow through.
Huh. Okay. All right. I was always wanted. I had friends that talked about hide behind them, and I just always wondered how that worked. But I guess it soft inside. It just kind of absorbed.
I guess it did. I don't know what happened to it, but the explosion would hit the outside. It would blow, and usually it would blow a small hole all the way through to whatever it hit.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't for them. The next picture, that's me in the actually my office and bedroom. On the right of the picture is the mosquito netting over my bed. That's Sergeant Gentry, who's the first platoon sergeant. Hanging from the wall behind him is a Claymore bag, and we used to put magazines in a Claymore bag, and I always kept a bunch of magazines in there, and my rifle somewhere in there. If I had to, grab two things and go out the door, I had magazines and a rifle. What I'm holding in my hand is a little piece of shrapnel that they cut out of one of my rifles. I had 6 rifles in Vietnam. They actually got wounded worse than I did. I butt stroked a guy. That was actually kind of funny. Well, it wasn't so funny for him, I guess, but I butt stroked a guy and the butt broke off the rifle. The entire rear stock broke off the rifle. So I could shoot it once, but the bolt would come screaming out the back of the rifle. So you had to kind of hold it off to the side if you wanted to shoot it, because otherwise you'd wind up shooting yourself with a bolt as well.
Well, John, I want to make a clarification. That bag back there, it didn't hold magazines for you to read.
No. M16 magazines was what it was full of.
Just
usually it carried Claymore mine, but it was very useful, and we'd use the Claymore and we'd keep the bags. So we're in high demand all the time.
And of course, your area of operation map behind you.
I had that, and I'd keep track of where the company was for a variety of reasons. We had worked that area, so I knew the area real well myself. I've got that's the first sergeant there with a bandage on his hand. That's Sergeant Norris again, who's the supply sergeant. And then I know that other lieutenant's name, but I've forgotten it again. I wrote it in the book. So you have to look in the book to find out what his name is. He's a nice guy.
All right, next.
Yeah, this is out in the boonies. And you can see who's been humping the woods, because the lieutenant that I mentioned before, his name escapes me, has not been in the woods for some reason. I don't know why. I was out there replacing. I was XO by this time, but I was replacing some lieutenant who was could be on R&R or could have been shot or whatever. But from the left, you've got Bob Richardson, who was an artillery forward observer. He's a guy that would call artillery for us. He was a lieutenant. I saw him recently at a reunion for the first time in 50 years. Then the other lieutenant, and I think I was running his platoon that particular time, then me, and then a guy named Barry Meyerson, who took over my platoon after a lieutenant named Arthur Quesada took it over from me, but then he got killed. And so then Meyerson took it over from him. Lieutenant Meyerson died. He got out of the Army, retired as a lieutenant colonel a few years ago. And then he died from cancer, Agent Orange induced cancer a couple of years ago as well, which was really sad. He was a very good officer, as was Richardson.
Yeah. John, let me ask you something. Where you were, did y'all have a lot of leeches?
Say again?
Well, did y'all have to go through a lot of leeches down where I was, and you weren't that far apart? Leeches were terrible.
You go through the grass, and you would pick them up, and they would get everywhere. I mean, you see these guys, and I tried the cigarette thing because I smoked back then, and all I did was burn my arm, but that bug juice would get them off.
Yeah.
The only problem when the bug juice hit the hole, like cut in your arm or leg or wherever it was, it burned like hell.
Oh, yes, it did. Yes, it did. And all those scratches you didn't know you had until it hit it.
No, you would scratch, and then you'd get all this blood because you'd break them free. And they've got an anticoagulant in their mouth. So the hole that they cut in you to bleed you out, it doesn't close up for a while until your blood literally washes that anticoagulant out. Messy. I hated those things. They were ugly.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, you can look down and see blood running and think you've been shot there, and then you realize it was the leech got so full he had to fall off.
Yeah, and that hole doesn't stop bleeding.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
How about elephant grass? Did y'all have elephant grass where you were?
We had some of that. The worst problem I had with elephant grass was you'd come in with a chopper. And as you know, elephant grass could be 16 feet tall. It usually wasn't where we were, but it could be. And they'd come down, and the elephant grass a lot of times would be deceptive. The pilot would think he was 3, 4, maybe 5 feet off the ground. He could be 10 or 12 feet off. And you're jumping off those skids into elephant grass, which is razor sharp, and you got 90 pounds on your back. And you land with a thud.
Yeah, because like you said, you could be pretty far up on the ground, but the pilot thinks you're just a short distance. And
yeah, he thinks he's done his job and brought you pretty close. And I didn't ever fault the pilot. It's very hard to see, and you can't tell. And if he makes a mistake and gets down too low, of course, then he's got a problem.
Yeah. All right, our next picture there.
Yeah, this was up in the Highlands. That's Sergeant Bunn again. And it gives you an idea of how hot it was. I took my shirt off one time and stood it up. It had so much salt in it. That fatigue jacket you see there.
Yeah.
You can see on the pocket on my right there's a little black thing hanging down. That's a whistle. And I used to use a whistle in firefights all the time. If you've been to Super Bowl, not that I've ever been there, but those refs blow a whistle, everybody hears it. In a firefight, everybody hears that whistle. And it's the only way you can get people's attention, because pretty soon your voice is shot if you're yelling a lot.
And it's not exactly quiet there either.
No, not a bit. And what you've got there is you got me and Bunn, and we're talking to Colonel Gerasi, who it was his third war. He was a Marine in World War II, an Army platoon leader in the Korean War. He'd been to Vietnam twice already as a Green Beret, and he was chosen to lead our battalion and train us and take us to Vietnam, and he did so. And later on, he led a brigade, and Dave Hackworth was one of his battalion commanders, and Hackworth says he was one of the best officers he ever served with. And then you've got Tom Gaffney, and Gaffney served in Korea as well, and he got a battlefield commission in Korea. But after that war, the Army did what they call a RIF, or reduction in force. He was given the choice. He'd still be an officer in the reserves, but he wanted to stay in active duty. He was RIFed back to sergeant, and he went all the way up to sergeant major in the Green Berets. And they said, you take his company to Vietnam and you can retire out as a captain. He actually retired out as a major.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
He retired out as a major. And then that's Bob Mayers, who's the S3, and he's wearing his Ranger cap from Ranger School. He was a major, and the S3 is operations. He does all the planning for what we did and so forth. And the guy above him is a guy named Little Bull, because our first sergeant was Bull Gergen, and Little Bull was his assistant. And Bull Gergen was a full-blooded Cherokee Indian, and he was on his third tour of Vietnam. So we had a lot of experience. We were a very, very unusual unit.
Yeah.
The thing on the side of Sergeant Bunn's helmet is a little radio receiver that we tried out for a while that sucked. So we didn't use them much. But I don't know, he liked to wear it for some reason.
Well, how much interaction did you have with Hackworth?
None. He
None.
was with the brigade. I believe it was 9th Infantry Brigade, which Gerasi took over several months after he left us.
Okay.
He got promoted to colonel and then took over that brigade.
Yeah, the ninth was located at Bearcat, right up from me for at one time, and
That's
I know
right.
Hackworth was quite a soldier himself. So
Yeah, he was. See, I believe he's the most decorated soldier of our era.
Yeah.
I believe he's got like 10 silver stars or something.
all right, let's look at this next picture here. I can see our RTO, and I can't tell what's going on. Look, other than getting shot at. Looks like.
We were getting shot at. We were on our way back into Fayette. I don't know who the kid is on the left, but he's leaning over, and you can get an idea of the tension from the scene, looking at the tension in his body. The RTO there is right behind me. He has to stay close to me. I have to say that all the time I was in Vietnam, every time I put my hand out like that, a radio hit it immediately. Radio handset hit it immediately. My RTOs were great guys, and they did their job. They stayed close to me. I've got my hand on my M16, and I'm trying to figure out, I guess, what's going on. The RTO's got 2 smoke grenades hanging from his PRC-25 PRC personal radio communicator, which is pretty heavy. He's got to carry that. He's got to carry a couple batteries in case it goes off. Then the guy to his right is James Philyaw. He was an M79 man. I don't know who the next guy is. The guy walking up, not bending over at all in the middle of a firefight is Bull Gergen, full-blooded Cherokee. He did not give a damn. He just did not. Shoot me, I will tear your heart out. That's his sort of approach to things, and I believe he would have if somebody had shot him, but they didn't. He's walking along there. We were going back into Fayette. We took back a lot of towns, and we would land on the outskirts of them and then just literally move right through them. That's what we did.
Yeah. All right.
This is Subic Bay. We came over to Vietnam except for a small advance party on a boat, the General Weigel, which was I forget what they call it, MATS, Military Transportation Service, something like that. And they had some naval officers on board, but it's not a commissioned Navy ship. It belongs to the Navy, but it's just a troop ship. And we had 2 battalions. The 503rd had a battalion that was trained for them by the 82nd, and we were 506, and we were trained for the 101st. The 503rd was trained to go with the 173rd Airborne separate, and they did. Well, I was the head cop on that ship, so I had almost 1,800 airborne paratroopers who had done nothing for the preceding 6 months except learn how to maim and kill people, and to do it if possible. And we got into the Philippines, and we gave them liberty, and they all got drunk.
No,
and most of them were pretty good. I mean, but we did have a few fights, and I talk about one of them in the book. And the shore patrol was unhappy with us. The admiral of the place was unhappy with us. But the troops were happy, and I was happy. I was proud of them. Nobody got killed. You know, I thought it was a very good deal.
Yeah, I remember the story in the book. It was a little bit more to it than that, but yeah. All right, we got one more picture, I believe. Let's see. Yep. It's a picture of basically the jungle, really not jungles, more probably looks like Central Highlands.
This is Central Highlands, and this is actually called a climax forest, and we're right up at what's called the tree line. You go up maybe another 10 or 20 feet higher on the ridge or mountain. We're on a ridge here, and there's no trees anymore. You get grass for a while, and then above that, there's nothing. That's the water line, and nothing grows above where the water stops. and we were up in that area, but it is unbelievably beautiful. Every now and again, you'd be walking along and you're tired and you're just really not in a very happy mood. And you take a look around and you just say, wow, this place is just gorgeous.
Yeah.
We were probably working near Dalat, is what this picture looks like for me. And Dalat is to this day one of the prettiest places I've ever been in the world. And I've been a few, but it was gorgeous. That grass grows about that high. It is soft. It is nice. You can lay back in it. It's probably only about 82, 85 degrees, not 110, 100 and whatever. Humidity's much lower. You get up high. Very lovely place. My mother actually sent me a whiskey cake when we were up there. And you make a whiskey cake and you make it, and it's a ring cake. It's a fruit cake, has dried fruit in it. And you pour half a pint of whiskey in it. And then after you bake it, you pour the other half around the top. So it soaks in, and it soaks in. The cherries seem to attract it. So if you bite into a cherry, it's like taking a shot. I got drunk on that cake in the Central Highlands.
I had one time and got sick. I
didn't get sick. It was wonderful stuff. My friend who became a Marine, Jimmy O'Donnell, went out and bought a pint of whiskey. My mother said, "There's an ugly damn bird on it. I hope it's good." It was wild turkey, 101 proof sipping whiskey.
Yeah, my son-in-law is from Poland. His father drinks 190 proof straight, and that's some mean stuff.
That'll toast your pipes. I mean, that's not good for you.
Well, listen, I want you to tell one story from the book. I want you to tell us about your machine gun.
My mother's machine gun.
Yes, those of you who are going to go out and buy the book, this is a great story. It's one of the reasons that you need to buy the book, but there's another reason you need to go out and buy the book. We're not going to tell you about it, but John has a problem with the banana trees, and you have to read the book to find out why he has problems with banana. Every time he sees a banana tree, the hair stands up on the back of his neck. So tell us about the machine gun.
Well, I was in Vietnam, and when I got there, I'd write my mother, but I wrote her spasmodically. I didn't want to write her regularly so she would expect a letter or something on a regular basis. Well, we're up in Phan Thiet, and it's been a couple of resupplies, and I haven't written her. So I've got to write something. And I'm sitting there, and I got to do it quick because the chopper's here, and I got to write it, get the chopper. I can't think of anything to say. And what I did routinely with all my letters, I would write in the upper right-hand corner the date and where we were. So the date and then Phan Thiet. And then I looked down at my lap, and I had a Stars and Stripes, which is an Army newspaper. And it had a story in the back of it about a strike at the Colt Patent Firearms M60 factory in Connecticut. And I started off the letter. I said, here these bozos are. They're out on strike, and we're fighting a war, and I'm short one machine gun. I got one in for repair, and I'm out here with 2 machine guns instead of 3, and I'd rather have 3. But it's real peaceful here in Phan Thiet. Nothing ever happens in Phan Thiet, and so forth. And I sealed the letter up, ran it to the helicopter, went back, and went on my way. Well, 2 days later, give or take, Tet starts. And on February the 3rd, my mother comes home. She worked at Georgetown University. She comes home, and she's real pleased. She saw my letter there in the mail. So she goes and gets a glass of wine and sits down, turns TV on to warm it up so she can watch an evening news, CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. She's sitting there, sipping on the wine, opens the letter up, reads Phan Thiet and the date, and she looks up, and Walter comes on. And Walter says something to the effect of, today in Vietnam, there was savage fighting in normally sleepy provincial capital of Phan Thiet. The 101st Airborne Division met the enemy head-on in a series of fierce firefights that went on all day. There were heavy casualties on both sides. And they got a map of Fayette behind there and big signs of explosions and stuff everywhere and so forth. Highly accurate, according to what I've been told. So my mother looks at that. She looks down at the top of the letter. She looks up, she's Fayette. Looks down the letter, she's Fayette. Looks up, looks down, sits there, starts crying. She gets up every now and again, every time there's a commercial, to go get some more wine. Crying Kate's over, turns the TV off, sits there and stares at it for a while, goes get some more wine, finishes the letter, the bottle of wine, sits there for a while. Along about midnight, she calls her mother because she knows two things. Number one, her son is in trouble. Number two, he needs a machine gun bad. So she calls her mother in Savannah. I mean, no thought of the cost. You got to know my mother to know long distance. She did not do. So she gets her mother on the phone at about, 1 o'clock or so. And they cry and they talk. And this is my grandmother's fourth war. World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. My mother's third war. And they both had sons. My brother had already served as a Marine. And my father served in World War II. And my mother's brother had served in World War II and Korea and was still serving in Vietnam as a naval officer. So they're crying. And finally, my grandmother says, let's call Dickie. Well, Dickie was Senator Richard Russell, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, probably the most powerful chairman ever. They get him on a conference call about 3 a.m. And my grandmother says, now, Dickie, how did you let this happen? How did you let my grandson be out there in a war with not enough machine guns? What's the matter with, and so forth? Because she had taught him for 2 years in grade school. And I can't remember the name of the grade school, but it's in the book. And knew him well. And he may have even been a cousin. Of course, cousin in the South is a sort of amorphous relationship, as we all know. In any event, something was going to happen in the morning. Definitely, there was going to be somebody's going to. So a day or two later, perhaps, maybe not even that long, we're in downtown Fayette in one of the fiercest house-to-house firefights of the war. And my RTO says, sir? I said, yes. And bullets are flying and stuff's happening. And I'm kind of busy. And he says, there's somebody on the phone saying he's a colonel, something or other. He gave his name. I don't remember his name. And he wants to talk to Lieutenant John Harrison. And that broke so many rules and regulations. You don't use real names over the air. You just don't. So finally, I didn't know what to do. I'm looking at the handset. So finally, I just said, yes. And he identified himself again. He said he had a machine gun for me. And he wanted me to tell him where a landing zone was because he was going to land that chopper and give me the machine gun right then, right now. I'm going to give you this machine gun. I said, well, sir, I'm kind of busy right now. We're getting shot at. He said, Lieutenant, I'm a colonel. You're a lieutenant. Get me an LZ so I can land this chopper now. I said, well, you can land right in front of me, sir. There's plenty of room. Of course, you're going to get shot at by machine guns, probably a few rockets and maybe a mortar or two. But you go ahead. I won't stop you. So he decided he'd go back to Fayette. When he got back there, the LZ Betty, which was our base camp, and we were back there a day or so later, and the armorer is still trying to clean that machine gun because that machine gun had been in a wooden box. Inside the wooden box, it was in the thickest shrink-wrapped plastic I've ever seen. And then it was full of Cosmoline. And you get Cosmoline out by washing it in gasoline. You get a 50-gallon drum, cut it in half, put a bunch of gasoline in it, just throw the parts in there and let the gasoline soak the Cosmoline out of the thing. Then you get to work with a toothbrush, which is what our armorer did. Armorer was actually killed about 5 days after that. His kid's name was Carl Ratti. He was really a nice kid. But in any event, it was beautiful. But that machine gun was assigned to me. Every other gun weapon in the battalion was assigned to the battalion commander, and they assigned it to the company commanders, and the company commanders gave them to the platoon leaders for their platoon. That one came to me, nobody else. Nobody was on that gun but me. And when I left, they made me give it back. I was upset.
That was your gun.
It was that's what I thought.
What did Gaffney had to say?
Gaffney thought it was hilarious. Actually, he was glad. You know, we liked the M60 machine gun. We were not unhappy to have an extra machine gun, which we did at that point. I never carried more than 3 guns. The limiting factor with carrying machine guns is the amount of ammunition, the weight of the ammunition. We would carry during TEP around 3,800 rounds a gun. And that's a lot of weight. And you can't carry anything but ammunition and water when you're carrying that much machine gun ammunition for each gun. The gunner will carry around 300 rounds, 500 rounds. Assistant gunner, 600-700 rounds. And then everybody else carries at least 100 rounds of machine gun, including me. Everybody carried machine gun ammunition. You did not want that gun to go silent in a firefight. And a lot of people, they look at, 3,500 rounds, they say, well, golly, that's a lot of ammunition. You're just blowing it away. Well, on full cyclic, that's about, 7-8 minutes. That's it. That doesn't last very long in a firefight, and particularly not in a street fight.
It's pretty rough on barrels, too.
Yeah. If you're moving in a street fight, you want that sucker on full cyclic. You want 560 rounds pounding down that street all the time you're moving because you want the heads down.
Well, John, I wish we had another hour to talk. Like I said, reading the book is like sitting down talking to a bunch of vets, except you don't hear this. Well, this ain't no. We'll stop it there. Folks out there, the book is Still Rain, the Tet Offensive, 1968. John lived it. It will make you cry. It will make you think, and it'll make you laugh. As you can just get the idea from the machine gun story. And you need to get the book and talking about this thing about John and the banana trees. He's got this real thing about banana trees, and probably for a good reason. So if you want to find out, get the book. And John,
there's a lot of what I call infantry humor in the book. And some people look at it, they say, why are you laughing? Why is that funny? Well, if you're infantry, you'll know why it's funny.
Yep. Even leg soldiers can understand what you got in there.
Yeah, well, legs are infantry too.
Yeah. All right.
A lot of people have told me, they've said that they've had difficulty talking about the war. And some of them have bought multiple copies of the book. One guy even sent it to his former wife.
That's pretty good. Maybe she could understand him a little bit more then.
I think that was his idea.
Yeah.
Trying to tell her who he was.
Yeah. Well, folks, thank you for watching our show tonight. We hope you had some value for you. If you wish to see the show again and repeat it, I know you want to go back and hear some more John's stories and so forth. Just log in to www.nissancommunications.com live and select On Demand, and then choose from the Lessons of Vietnam and choose the show you want to see. Tell your friends if you like the show. Tell me if you didn't like the show. Our next show will be at 8 o'clock, as usual, on the 11th of July, and will be Bat 21, the real story. It's not the story that Gene Hackman and them did on the movies, but the real story. Please have a fun and safe 4th of July as we commemorate the birth of the United States of America, and look forward to having you back on July 11th. John, I do thank you very much. I enjoy it, and I really enjoyed your book. And I hope we got 2 or 3 people out there to get the book because they deserve it. And welcome home. And
thank you. You too. Welcome home. It's available on Amazon.
Amazon. That's where I got mine. And you can have it. You can have it by Friday. If you order it tonight, you'll have it by Friday. And
Get
then
Kindle, you could have it tonight.
Well, that's right. That's right. On Prime, you could get it tonight. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I thank you very much. Enjoyed having you on the show. Hold just a second while we sign off, and we'll talk to you a little bit afterwards.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. It's been a pleasure to be here. And welcome home to everybody that got home.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.